The Year of Blank is a pretty common marketing tactic, used to make this set of 365 days seem so much more monumental compared to the last set of 365 days, and ironically, it often ends up backfiring spectacularly. The Year of Luigi is probably the biggest example of this, with Nintendo aiming to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the brother in 2013 by devoting an entire year's worth of Luigi-themed content around it, like 2 3DS games, a Wii U spin-off, and a couple eShop exclusive releases. The company lost $500 million that year. Wahoo! It's almost as if hyping folks up so much for the best year ever, only to not be able to back up that claim, raises expectations and therefore leads to inevitable disappointment. Sound familiar to anyone? I mean, okay, there was also the Wii U, but if there's one thing that should be fairly obvious about this marketing strategy, it's that you can only really use it once. You know, otherwise, what's stopping you from calling every year the Year of Blank, you know? There's no double dipping here. And definitely no triple dipping. Sega's standing right behind me, isn't it? Sega has done this 3 times that I'm aware of, and I have to specify that I'm aware of, because I've heard conflicting statements about there being more years of Sonic, but officially, that I can prove, there have been 3. These years being 2003, 2014, and 2022. I find it funny that the Year of Sonic has never been when the series was at its actual peak in cultural popularity. Again, it's almost like this is a cheap tactic used to drum up hype. Again, I've heard some more dates floating around, like I recall hearing somewhere that 1992 was called the Year of Sonic at one point, but considering they were only at Sonic 2, I highly doubt they'd make a call like that so early. Now, these confirmed Years of Sonic vary wildly in terms of reception. One was extremely positive, one was extremely negative, and the other was pretty mixed. And so today I thought it'd be a neat throwback to look through each and every time Sega claimed it to be the Year of Sonic, and see just what released in that time for them to consider it that.
Here they come. Pirates of the Caribbean, rated PG-13, starts this Wednesday.
The first time the Year of Sonic title was used was in 2003. Ironically, the Year of Sonic came not too long after the downfall of Sega as a hardware manufacturer, the Dreamcast going bust in 2001, with games still releasing into 2002. With Sonic games now having to release on multiple different consoles, I can imagine Sega wanted to use this as a way to remind the public, hey, we may be gone, but Sonic is still here. Please have a family to feed. This label was actually given by both Takashi Iizuka and Yuji Naka, according to, well, Twitter and Wikipedia. Not the best sources I'm aware, but it's true, bro, trust. This was mainly due to 2 big releases, Sonic Heroes and Sonic X. Although I'd like to point out that Sonic Heroes was released on December 30th, 2003, so they were really pushing it. 2003 also saw the release of 3 other games, that being Sonic Battle, Adventure GX, and Sonic Pinball Party. Now, one of those is actually a pretty fun, if not incredibly repetitive and simple isometric fighting game. One is a botched port of a Dreamcast game that, at the very least, allowed for more folks to try it out even if it is the inferior version, and the other is pinball. But hey, more Sonic content is only a good thing, right? Quantity over quality was the name of the game back then. But really, X and Heroes were the 2 major things coming out that year, and were what people had their eyes most on. Yuji Naka believed that the release of these 2 things would skyrocket the franchise to new heights of popularity, something similar to the Pokemon craze when its anime came out, which is just hilarious in retrospect. So, did they deliver for a truly epic Year of Sonic? Well, I guess it depends on who you ask. Now, Sonic X is a series I've not seen very much of. It sees Sonic getting transported to Earth along with his friends and Dr. Eggman, where he runs into this rich kid, Chris Thorndyke, who cries and moans all day about his parents not being there for him enough, leaving him alone all day in this giant fuck-off mansion. Boo-hoo, I'm shedding a tear for you, Chris. I remember watching the first 20 or so episodes and found it so boring and dull. The animation is clearly on a shoestring budget, so most of the action is desperately trying to get away with as many still images as possible. The stories are stupid. I think the one I quit on was Teals trying to save some drafts or some crap, and it just couldn't keep my interest for very long in general. And yes, I was watching the Japanese dub, thank you very much. I've seen the actually adapted Adventure 1, 2, and even parts of Battle later on, which sounds pretty cool, honestly. And I've heard nothing but good things about the 3rd and final season, so maybe someday I'll get around to checking out the full thing so I can form an actual opinion on it, but at the moment, not for me.
Imposter! I assure you, Sonic, I'm no imposter.
Why does he sound like that? I feel the complete opposite way towards the other highlight of 2003, that being Sonic Heroes. As many of you Splash Dash aficionados would know, it is in fact my favorite game in the entire series. It's also the first mainline game I ever played as a kid, which I assure you has no influence on my opinion of it. After Adventure 2, Sonic Team wanted to pull things back for Sonic's first multi-platform outing, which is why they refrained from calling it Adventure 3, despite it pretty much building off of the story of SED2 mainly with Shadow and his revival. The back-to-basics approach was mostly seen through the aesthetics, going for an art style much more in line with the original Genesis games, checkered hills, outside casinos. Because of the Dreamcast game's larger focus on story, it meant most of the levels needed to fit into the narrative they wanted to tell, while also making it believable that this could all take place on Earth. But Heroes had no such restriction, and because of that, it allowed for some of the most creative locales we've ever seen in 3D Sonic, like a massive futuristic power plant and haunted mansions. Apparently, Heroes went through a very troubled development. Considering they had no experience in working on Xbox and PlayStation hardware, porting it to those systems proved to be quite the challenge, with the PS2 version suffering greatly as a result of this, with the graphics seeing a docking quality such as less detailed shadows, and the biggest issue, it had to run at 30 FPS and not 60. A detail which I never noticed when I was younger, with that being the version I grew up with, but apparently it's like the biggest travesty on Earth. Because of this tight development time, a lot of the team's initial ambitious ideas had to be scrapped, such as way more playable characters, 18 to be exact, some of which were cut out of the game entirely. Like this is what the original 6-team roster would look like. Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, EME Cream and Rouge, Chaos, E102 Gamma, and Big. 2 of those characters are dead, Espio, Charmy, and Vector, Fang, Bean, and Bark, and finally, Metal Sonic, Ray, and Mighty. It's safe to say if the game released like this, we would be looking at a very different franchise. I mean, no Shadow, no Omega, unification between classic and modern before classic and modern were even something to consider. Boy, what a time that would have been. Despite all the scaling back, none of this stopped all the extra work the team had to do on it just to release in time. Takashi Iizuka definitely had it the worst. Once one of the level designers became ill, he was the primary person working on the stages, and so worked night and day at the SEGA offices, losing 22 pounds and suffering from insomnia. So the next time you want to bitch about Sonic Heroes having repetitive levels, think of the poor little Takashi Iizuka you're insulting. You wouldn't want to hurt the feelings of this sweet innocent man now, would you? Upon release, Heroes didn't get as good a reviews as Sonic's previous 2 adventures, many criticizing its controls and poor camera. But even still, it got a lot of positive traits attributed to it, such as a stellar art style, fun level design, and unique team mechanics. Although Sonic fans as a whole are pretty split down the middle on this one. But that's why I said this year's quality depends on who you ask. I think X is boring and Heroes is fantastic, but Joe Schmo over there might say X is God's gift to Mobius and Heroes sucks. Doesn't matter how wrong he is, we still have to respect his opinion. So in terms of quality, yeah, this year of Sonic left much to be desired, I suppose. However, if the goal of the year of Sonic was to make a shitload of money, then SEGA succeeded with flying colors. Heroes ranked at the top of the charts for a while, all versions getting a greatest hits variant, and at this point in time, it has sold a total of nearly 6 million copies. For reference, Generations sold half that and is considered one of the best games in the franchise. X was a licensing juggernaut. It had toys, books, DVDs, clothing. For a long while, Sonic X was extremely popular. You can't see it, but I'm smirking right now. It consistently dominated the ratings in the United States. For many kids, Sonic X was their introduction to the series.
Oh, say, can you see?
And despite what I may think of it, that certainly counts for something. That's not even to mention Sonic's return to Happy Meals that year, his first time partnering with McDonald's since 1994. The LED game sucked, but hey, that's a big deal. So yeah, even if the content was hit or miss, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who claims that 2003 wasn't an incredibly successful year for Sonic in regards to exposing the brand to a newer generation of kids. Many of whom would become lifelong fans. That's me, I'm home. The next year of Sonic, however, no, that's a different story.
You can help Emmett become a master builder by building his mech. Load Emmett and roll into battle.
2014 was considered to be the next year of Sonic. And hey, it was impactful. Just for all the wrong reasons. Things seem strangely familiar though. The next year of Sonic marks the next time both a big video game and TV series would be premiering for the franchise. The problem? They were doing a reboot. I remember the day a 12-year-old Splash Dash first saw this screenshot posted to the Sonic the Hedgehog Facebook account. I couldn't understand what I was looking at, this strange, more detailed environment with the silhouettes of 4 characters. Fans across the world trying to piece together what they could possibly look like. I recall being in such belief that this could have been Knuckles that I seriously somehow thought it was Eggman. Yeah, I don't know either. But they would eventually be revealed, and the internet gave a collective... nah. People were not having it. Most just thinking they were unnecessarily complicating such simple designs to appeal to a more Western audience. Which, to be fair, is what they were doing. But honestly, I never really minded them all too much. Tails and Amy's were so minor that I couldn't care less. I liked the bandana and sports tape on Sonic, as well as the longer limbs. And Knuckles, despite being the most controversial redesign, never seemed all that unnatural to me. They clearly just wanted to lean into his stronger nature more for some body variety. I think people were so negative towards this because of Sega's poor communication with what Boom actually was. At first, it seemed like this was the start of a new era for Sonic. This would be replacing all the modern and classic material going forward. Someone at SEGA having to come out to specify that this would simply be running concurrently with the other Sonic stuff. Which even then is an equally brain-dead move, as it only creates more brand confusion, since for almost half a decade we had 3 different versions of Sonic all at the same time. You could go into a store and see a toy package that had 2 different Sonics in it, and a third off to the side with the only immediate difference being he had a scarf. I can imagine the general public were utterly baffled. But Sega had big plans for Boom, launching with 2 video games, one for Wii U and one for 3DS, with some pretty interesting developers behind them, not the usual Sonic team. But instead the group responsible for Sly 4, Zanzuru Games, and a new studio consisting of ex-Naughty Dog members. Along with that there'd be a new series of Archie comic books, and for the first time since X, a brand new television series based off the Boom brand. Each and every one of these were utter failures. See, when doing such a controversial reimagining of an IP as beloved as Sonic the Hedgehog, a very important factor to consider with its launch would be to, you know, make sure the stuff you're releasing is good? The video games are some of the most infamous in history. While the 3DS's Shattered Crystal is an infuriatingly forgettable 2D platformer that had such a lack in content that it would require you to replay the same 20-minute levels multiple times searching for trinkets just to progress, but the Wii U release was seen as a massive joke across the internet. Releasing in such a laughably unfinished state that many would claim it marked the beginning of the second Sonic Dark Age, with him only getting out of the previous Dark Age a couple years before. I've made a whole video detailing why Boom turned out the way it did, the main driving factor being Sega's incompetence in working with the Sonic brand, taking the ambitious platformer Big Red Button we're creating for next-gen consoles, and not only forcing them to shove it onto the vastly inferior Wii U mid-development, not only forcing them to rewrite a majority of the script, including changing the whole tone of the thing to fit more in line with the new TV series to pair alongside it, but also... Okay, well that's kinda it, but it's bad enough as is.
It's one fine-looking barbecue pit. Why doesn't mine look like that?
The game was universally panned upon release and memed on for years for its plethora of bugs, and unlike other bad Sonic games, it didn't even sell well. Like, at least 06 managed to sell around 2 million copies, yet both versions of Boom collectively couldn't even break 500,000, becoming the worst-selling mainline Sonic game of all time. I have to specify mainline because I can't imagine a game like Pinball Party sold gangbusters either. The Archie comics were actually really funny with such amazing titles as Dr. Eggman Buys a Gorilla, and I liked them a lot. However, they were only cancelled 11 issues into its run, with future books being fully written but never got to any kind of completed stage, including ones by Alan Denton and Greg Hahn who had major involvement in writing for the TV series. According to someone working on it, the comics were not suffering from a lack of seals. Apparently they were doing just fine, and the fact that they were planning on more means that the most likely scenario here is that Sega had all but given up on Sonic Boom at this point, and didn't see much point in continuing the series. Despite that, however, the Boom series somehow continued till 2017, with the surprising announcement of a third game, Fire and Ice on the 3DS, which is actually pretty good. I'd honestly recommend it, but also because of the TV show. I genuinely think Sonic Boom is the best Sonic show. My buddy Ellis Mark said Prime was on Twitter, and while we usually share the same opinion, I gotta say, after reflection, nah, Boom is better. It's for sure the most different compared to the other series, where they tend to be focused on Sonic and the gang taking on the tyrannical force that is Dr. Eggman, while incorporating various video game elements. Boom slowly over time turns into a goddamn Seinfeld-esque sitcom, where we watch Sonic and friends hang about their little island consisting of the same 4 background characters, where they sometimes battle Eggman, but mostly just torment him.
Is this a towel? What am I supposed to cover with that? Are you making fun of me?
Season 1 was a mixed bag overall. It starts kind of formulaic, like they're still trying to make an action comedy show that has some level of stakes, with fairly stereotypical storylines, like Dr. Eggman becoming Sonic's roommate, or Tails creating a robot that's too honest and makes all his friends upset with each other. But halfway through it completely degrades, like this platypus guy becoming the hero's image specialists who tries to help them set a better example for kids.
From now on, you must be exemplary in every way.
Sounds like you want us to become soulless drones.
Finally, someone's paying attention.
Knuckles torturing a sad, weak man on the island until he turns into a supervillain.
Don't look at me! I'm a ballerina! A ballerina!
And Sonic and Knuckles needing to go on a game show to win a couch after spilling cheese on Amy's.
I can't believe you knew that.
Hey, you gotta know your enemy, especially when he is your bro. Ow!
And it just gets more bizarre with Season 2.
I knew TV was just a big conspiracy to control everyone's minds. I'm not talking to you. You keep watching.
Season 2 right off the bat is just 10 times better than 1. They've fully embraced the absurdity. Not to mention the action seeing a massive step up in terms of storyboarding and choreography. My favorite episodes being the one where Sonic is captured by an obsessive stalker who is definitely not an insert of Chris Chan.
Let's act out my Sonic fan fiction. I'll pick something family-friendly. No, not that one. Oh, definitely not that one.
A parody of Spider-Man 3 where Sonic finds a suit that makes him evil.
Check it out. Twins. Hey, Percy. Daisy.
A group of tertiary villains banding together to create a bowling team, only to have a Beatles-esque breakup. Dr. Eggman realizing that he's not actually a doctor, and so has to go back to school to get his doctorate. And a genuinely great four-parter where the gang travel to a robot utopia in the Clydes. It includes a genius twist to a random plot point brought up in the first season. Also, special shout out to the final two-parter, which is also really good unironically. You should watch him for sure, because boy was this show slept on. The first season premiered to really good ratings for the 7 AM time slot it was set to, but gradually declined after it was pushed to the backside more and more, and then dumped on Boomerang for all of season 2, where it suffered less than 100,000 viewers for a majority of its run. Which is a real shame. Watching this series when it came out really did make you feel like you were a part of this tiny little fandom whom nobody ever really appreciated or paid attention to. Boom in general is a really sad story. They had such massive plans for this. Like, look at all these images for UCAS stores that they had wanted to completely revamp with Sonic Boom themed activities. But sadly, it was never meant to be. Being a Sonic merch collector myself, I vividly remember the Sonic toy drive of 2015 and 2016, where the Boom stuff sold so abysmally stores lost all confidence in the franchise and just stopped carrying it as much, which we've only begun to start recovering from with Jack Specific. SEGA of Japan clearly didn't care enough to fully support the project, despite the whole idea of it being to appeal to folks outside of Japan, but alas, 2014 was most definitely not a successful year of Sonic. So far we have 2003 being pretty mixed and 2014 being an undoubted failure. So let's see how things turn out with the final year of Sonic. Could we get a year that was both financially and critically successful? Let's find out. Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention the real leading project behind 2014. That of course being Sonic Jump Fever.
Spider-Man No Way Home.
Here we have it, the final year of Sonic. That being, well, last year. So it's still fresh in everyone's minds. And very much paralleling 2003, I think it's the most variety of Sonic content we've seen since then. Not only receiving the next big AAA game, but also a small collection of classics remade for modern hardware, as well as a new Netflix series, and on top of all of that, the release of the second Sonic movie. Remember 2019 where we'd be lucky to get 2 bare-bones spin-offs? Glad to see this SEGA making a return. Let's start with Sonic Origins for obvious reasons. It is undoubtedly the worst thing to release in 2022. Everybody had been waiting for a day when SEGA would make a collection of all the classic Sonic games, mainly Sonic 3 and Knuckles, in a single package. So how they managed to f that up is honestly not surprising. The games themselves are as great as always. Having an official way to play them in widescreen on something other than an iPhone is a joy. Even if I am a little peeved that they included a classic mode where you can play the originals but they're not even. Basically just playing the same remake version but in 4x3. But I love that they added a way to play through all 4 of them in order, with wonderfully animated cutscenes in between each of them. Really, on the outside, this seems amazing. What's the problem here? Well, it's more so about what they didn't include. First of all, $40, $45 for the deluxe edition. And what are we getting here? 4 30-year-old games? Where's 3D Blast, Knuckles Chaotix? Hell, any of the Game Gear games. Sonic Mega Collection Plus came out in the PS2, and it had 17 games on it. And sure, these are more than your standard emulations and all, but in some cases, changes were made for the worse. Everyone had rumored that the reason Sega could no longer port Sonic 3 and Knuckles onto newer hardware was because of legal troubles with the soundtrack, mainly pertaining to Michael Jackson's involvement along with Brad Buxer, which was all but confirmed when Origins came out, and we have his songs replaced with the scrapped versions of the songs from the original game, which I'm sorry, just do not hold a candle to the Brad Buxer jams, it's no contest. This bare bones museum, no comic covers, no bizarre remixes of random Sonic songs. This is official. Sonic Origins is a great way to play these 4 specific games in the modern day. Again, widescreen was more than enough to give them that title, but it's more so a disappointment for all the missed opportunities. But still, not a total bust. And there is the rumored Sonic Origins Plus coming out soon, so we'll see what that adds. Hopefully they don't charge for it though. Sonic Frontiers made up for that. I'm not going to give a full review on it here or anything, but I think most, including myself, ended up being pleasantly surprised by it. Most people outside of the Sonic community did not think this game was going to be anything good. Not helped by the terrible marketing that presented it in the worst way possible, with boring walkthroughs where nothing was happening. But thankfully it was released to a collective, it was alright. I don't think it's going to blow anyone's minds or anything, but Frontiers succeeded at showing general audiences that 3D Sonic isn't the lost cause it's always presented as by game critics. With a fun controlling Sonic with mildly fun platforming challenges, paired with a story that was at least trying to take itself seriously, and a lot of spectacle. Just hoping next time they don't have to cut out half the game before release. The main thing I'm happy to see with Frontiers is that it's selling well. At this point in time, having sold around 3 million copies, which is around the same as Generations, but remember, Frontiers isn't even half a year old yet. So without question, I think we're going to be looking at one of the top-selling Sonic games of all time in a couple of years. The movie was without a doubt the biggest thing to come out of 2022, however. After an alright first outing, the second Sonic movie mainly succeeds when it comes to giving Sonic fans stuff to point and gawk at, incorporating many more elements from the video games such as Tails, Knuckles, Ice Cap, Gun, the Chaos and Master Emeralds, Super Sonic, and hyping up the next entry with a first look at Shadow the Hedgehog. It's a fine movie. There's a lot more going on than the first one, that's for sure. Instead of a buddy road trip, it's something more resembling, you know, Sonic. Funnily enough, very recently, we've begun seeing the tide turn on the second Sonic movie a bit. This is because we've been seeing more and more of the new Mario movie, which is of course fully CGI and much more reference heavy, being a way more fateful adaptation. Which honestly, I'm mixed on. Like, yeah, the Mario movie is looking to be way more faithful, but that doesn't equate to a good movie necessarily. Like, at a certain point, the discussion just is becoming, my movie has more references than your movie, and I think that goes to show what these people really want out of a film. Again, just something to point and gawk at so they can feel smart for recognizing a piece of iconography. There's nothing wrong with that, but doesn't make it a good movie. And that's not to say I think the Mario movie will be bad. It'll probably just be your average Illumination 6 out of 10, but saying that the second Sonic movie isn't good just because Mario is more faithful to the source material is kind of dumb to me. And I don't even really like the second Sonic movie. I remember my friend got shit on constantly for saying that he didn't enjoy the second film that much, because at the time, everyone treated it like it was the greatest thing ever. But apparently now defending the second Sonic movie is considered the unpopular opinion. I don't understand the world anymore. Either way, Sonic Movie 2 is alright. No other movie being more or less faithful will change that. And it made Paramount a boatload of money, raking in around $400 million, a sizable increase from the first, so calling it anything other than a success is just false. And lastly, releasing late into last year, we got the Netflix series Sonic Prime, which puts Sonic in a new world with slight redesigns for all the characters, yet it is still somehow considered canon? It's fine. Yeah, I was initially a lot more positive when I first watched through it, but that was mostly from me being able to look past the fact that it wasn't going to be the Sonic I know and love. But the deviations that did make aren't ones I'm particularly fond of. Like making Rouge a core member of Team Sonic seems so bizarre, and like it was only done to make the boy-to-girl ratio a little more even to broaden its appeal. The pacing is also super weird. Like we'll spend 3 episodes setting up the dystopian Eggman City, then drop it to go to some prehistoric world for a couple episodes, then come back to the Eggman City for a while, then go to some pirate world, then it ends.
Shut up, you stupid bitch! Hi-ya!
I can imagine this will be a lot easier to swallow when the full thing is out. And they interrupt episodes so much, having flashbacks to previous moments that establish the characters because they jump so quickly into the conflict. Worst of all to me though is Sonic's characterization. Yep, that's right, I'm on that side. I was really excited at first to see a version of Sonic who has to learn how to appreciate his friends more, like what they were advertising. It's like they can finally realize that scrapped boom concept. However, it is not reflected in the series at all. Sonic spends so long talking about how super cool and awesome his friends are, but then we'll have a random flashback to a time where he didn't appreciate a tree enough for Amy, which makes him realize he needs to be a better friend to them. But again, this is only ever told to us, because we constantly just see him acting like a dork who praises his friends for every little thing they do. I don't know, I much prefer cool jerk with a heart of gold Sonic over goody two-shoes loves his buddy Sonic. But I get you may not agree with me, that's fine. I'm willing to look past it making decisions I personally wouldn't do. I still think it's overall a pretty alright show. Although I doubt we'll see a proper season 2 go into production. That doesn't seem like it's in Netflix's cards right now. Who knows, maybe if they sell enough Tonka trucks we'll see them make one. Yes, this is real. Oh yeah, that's right! Dude, Jakks Pacific fucking stepped up their game in 2022 when it came to Sonic merch. Movie 2 line was great and I'm very excited for Primes. I want to make a sequel to that problem with Sonic merch video from last year, so I'll save all that talk for that video, but point being, I think it's pretty obvious to most that 2022 was monumental to the Blue Hedgehog. While none of the content released during this time was my favorite per se, again, nothing released in 2022 for me personally goes above being alright, but I won't deny this is without a shadow of a doubt the most successful attempt we've seen so far at a year of Sonic. And I think at this point SEGA have played all their attempts at using this marketing ploy. I can't imagine them wanting to try and follow up a year like 2022, especially since I don't think there's going to be a point in time for the next decade where we see this much Sonic stuff releasing in a single year. The next mainline game will probably release in 2027. I imagine Movie 3 will be the finale. And we've only gotten a TV series once every 10 or so years. Whether or not you personally like the content in it, 2022 was something special, so appreciate it. Because I think it's the closest we've ever gotten to a true year of Sonic.
Live and learn.